Okay, real quickly, just going to review over what we did from yesterday. We were finishing up started our unit for the percent proportions unit. Let me go ahead and go back to the very first pages that we had. So for the very first thing that we worked on, we talked about the proportion, right? Being able to do our cross product, making sure that they are equal to each other in order for it to be a proportional relationship. If it was not proportional, then they were not equal to each other when we did the cross product. So like 5 times 3 is going to be 15, 8 times 2 is going to be 16, so that's non-proportional. Then we utilized the proportionality. Where's my page 2? Oh, nope, no page 2 there. Hold on. Give me a second. We utilize that proportion relationship to be able to solve for a missing value. Remember, it's not just solving for the value, but it's equally important to understand what the equation is that would be set up to it. So I know in 6th grade you guys were taught to just multiply and then divide, but here you now need to know which equation is going to relate to that proportion and then solve the equation. So you're essentially setting up these one-step equations here. Then we also talked about the importance of making sure that you set up your ratios correctly. So however you set up your first ratio is going to determine how you have to set up your second ratio. So you want to be very careful about that. I want to show you yesterday's, you guys, for problem number 5, I think you guys had set it up as 62 minutes over 93 pages. And I wanted to show you that 4th academic set it up as 93 pages over 62 minutes. So notice that even though you guys set it up differently, some of you might have set it up this way, some of you set it up this way, the answers still resulted the exact same, 114 minutes, 114 minutes. So you want to make sure that you are very well aware that it just depends on how you set up that first ratio. Remember, that first ratio is always going to be the information that's been given to you, and then using that ratio, you can determine how you have to set up the questions ratio. Okay, so doing that. And then we finished yesterday with the percent proportion. So talking about the is over of equals percent over 100. So those are, even though they're words, they're not technically called word problems or context problems because there's no context, no actual like real world situation occurring there. But when you guys look at it as real world situations, you'll be identifying parts over whole for percent over 100. Percent over 100 is never going to change. It's always going to be blank over 100. Okay, but the part over the whole is always going to be what's going to be different. So then we identified, and now what we're going to do for today is we're going to finish off our notes. So everybody should be turned over to this page, page 4. We're going to go ahead and finish identifying things. So we're going to identify now in these contextual problems the is, the of, and the percentage, or instead of is and of, we're identifying the part and the whole. So this requires you to use some logic, thinking through the situation of what they're asking and identifying, okay, the information they're giving me, is that a part of the problem or is that the whole of the problem? Okay, so for problem number 5, the number of 7th graders in a school is 312. This is 39% of the student population. So how many students are in the school? So the question is asking how many students are in the school. Is that a part, a whole, or a percent that they're looking for? A whole, right? The number of students in the school, that would be every student in the school. That would be considered a whole. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and identify that question in pink. That's going to be my part, my whole. Okay, so then the rest of this information, we're looking at 39%. That's easy right there. That should be easy to identify that was our percentage that we're going to be dealing with. And then the part, so this is where people get confused. They're like, well, wait, it's telling us that the number of 7th graders is 312. The reason that that's a part is because are 7th graders the only students at the school? No, that is considered the part. you've got 6th grade, and you've got 8th grade. Okay, so that's just a part of our school. So when we're setting this up, we're identifying our part, which again, that's our is, and that's going to be 312. We identified our whole, which is our of, and that's a value that's missing. That's our question, so we put a variable in there. And then we can identify our percentage. And like I said, percentages are always the easiest thing to identify because they have a percent sign behind them. Okay, so once we've got that set up, we can then create our proportion. Remember, it's part over whole equals percent over 100. And then we would just do our cross product. Okay, the first set of numbers that we're going to multiply is the variable and 39. That's going to give us 39x. Then we're going to multiply 312 times 100. That's going to give us 31,200. And from there, we then need to solve. So this is the equation that would represent this contextual word problem. 39x is equal to 31,200. From there, we can then go ahead and divide both sides by 39. And we'll get x is equal to 800. And that represents the total number of students. So it's 800 total students at the school. You always want to make sure that when you are answering a word problem, you relate it back to what it's representing, okay, what it quantifies. What I want you guys to do is you're going to do the remainder of this page on your own. Okay, so for problem number 6, Sally's soccer team won 17 games. They played 25 games. What percent did they win? Jean-Luc? 68%. Okay, so again, here's the part. You don't win everything. You win, you lose, sometimes you might tie. So that's going to be our part, 17. So that's going to go at the top of our ratio. How many games you played, that's considered to be the whole. So you played 25 games, so it's 17 over 25. And then the question is asking what percent did they win. So we don't know the percentage, that's going to be our variable, our x. Okay, from there we can then do our cross product. We can multiply 25 times x to get 25x. We can then multiply 17 times 100. That's going to give us 1,700. And then we can divide. If we divide both sides by 25, we'll get x is equal to 68%. And that's the percentage of games that they won. Okay, for problem number 7, 15% of students at Northbrook Middle School are absent today. There are 920 students in the school. How many are absent? Ava? 138. Okay, so we have 920 students at the school. That's considered to be the whole. We are given a percentage right here. 15% were absent today. So our percentage of absences is going to be 15. Make sure you understand, because sometimes they might say, hey, 15% are absent today. We want to know how many students were present. So would you use 15% then? If they give you 15% are absent today, we want to know how many students are actually at school, then you wouldn't use 15%, you would use 85%. How do we get 85%? Jeremy? 100 minus 15. Okay, so be very careful, because there's a lot of times where they throw that at you, where they're giving you a situation, or they're saying, oh, there were 17 games won out of 25 games played. We want the percentage of games that they lost. Okay, so then you would have to go, oh, well, 17 games we won, take it away from 25, we lost 8 games. So now we're going to do 8 over 25 equals x over 100. Okay, so you got to be very careful about the question. Sometimes it's going to try to trick you up to ask for something that it's not giving you the information for, right? Okay, so we have our percentage, just 15 out of 100. We don't know our part. That's what we're trying to figure out, how many students were actually absent. So that's our variable. So we put x over 920 is equal to 15 over 100, and then we can cross product it. So we do 100 times x is 100x, and then 920 times 15, that's going to give us 13,800. And then we'll divide both sides by 100. And we'll get x is equal to 138, and that is the number of absent students. Okay, and then for problem number 8, suppose there are 20 questions on the test. 25% of the answer choices are B. How many questions on the test are not going to be answer choice B? Ollie? 15. Okay, so we know that there are 20 questions on the test. That is going to be our whole. We know a percentage, again, percentage of answer choices being B is 25%. So what percentage am I going to use if I don't want B?
75.
75. I'm going to take 100 and subtract 25, and that's going to equal 75%. Because we do not want to have answer choice B. So 75% are not B. So we would do 75 over 100. And then we're going to do x, because we don't know how many, that's our part, over 20. Okay, then we can do our cross product. 100 times the x is 100x. 20 times the 75 is 1,500, and then we're just going to divide both sides by 100. We get 15 questions that are not B. Okay, so be careful. You need to make sure you're reading very carefully. Again, 25% of those choices are going to be B. That means the other portion are not going to be answer choice B. If you are answer choice A or C or D, then you are considered to not be an answer choice of B. So you're looking for that other 75%. All right, you have loaded into Google Classroom a iExcel assignment.